And we would like to welcome everyone to this week's conversation. We have with us today Vanessa Maddox, Kim Newman, and Jamie Nedick. And we'll be discussing today how women are breaking in the pandemic. And we do not want to alienate men because we do understand we're dealing with a lot of men in the community that may be, single parents. I was talking to one today that was, just talking about how he's having a hard time finding play dates for his kids. He's not used to that type of dealing with that type of environment. So, hey, I just want to welcome you all to the conversation. And I will be sharing this out to a couple different groups, but please feel free to use the comment section to add any comments or questions that you may have regarding this particular topic. So with that, Jamie, I understand that you have some statistics that you want to share with us, and then we can dive on into.
So first of all, we want to state outright, as Mary said, that this pandemic is hurting men and women, and it's particularly hurting families. What we do want to take a look at, though, is who's getting hit the hardest. That's not to diminish what's going on for the fathers and husbands and our brothers and our lives. But if we started out from where this started out, if you look back in 2018, 41% of Latina mothers and almost 68% of Black mothers were their family's primary breadwinners. So because of the disproportionate mix and who is actually the primary breadwinners in our families, when Latina and Black mothers get hit hard, it disproportionately hits families in the United States. And so when we look at job loss in this pandemic, unfortunately, Blacks and Latinas have been hit much harder than other populations. And when we started to look through all of that data, we found that those populations have been hit especially hard. When we look specific to Latina workers, they faced devastating job losses in the COVID-19 recession. Women overall in December, when we looked at the jobs that were lost, all 140,000 jobs lost in December, net lost jobs, every single job. I want to be very clear, every single job was lost by a woman. And when we look at the unemployment rates, beginning back in March, they skyrocketed in April. And then as of April, unemployment last year was 18.9% for Latina women compared to 14.2% for the white unemployment rate. So these are families that are getting hit really, really hard. And the policies that we've designed to help families aren't necessarily helping in these communities. And one of the reasons is that if we look at where people live, the reality is, as much as I like where I live, it's a little bit diverse, but not near as much as we would like. But both Latina communities and Black communities are communities because of redlining and because of everything that's left over, the socioeconomic impacts from where this country started. So when we have a population that's disproportionately hit by unemployment, it's taking down entire neighborhoods, entire communities. And so the places where we would go to reach for help when we lose our job, we go to our families and we go to our neighbors, they're also more likely to have lost their jobs too. If you also look at places where women in particular work, we are far more likely to work in the service industry. Women of color are even more likely than white women to do that. And as such, the policies that we have to help have not necessarily helped service industry workers as much as they've helped other industries. And these are where women of color make up the majority of our jobs. So we need to be thinking about what can we do as far as policies that will actually work in the context economically where this occurs. So for example, Black women carry more student loan debt and are more likely to be evicted than any other demographic group. So we need things like really strong evicted protections. So when we think about policies, we need to think about the entire community. Latina women are disproportionately likely to be uninsured and to have benefits and to have benefited significantly from the Affordable Care Act, which we know got axed under the previous presidential administration. So things that we need are further gains like an executive order strengthening Medicaid and the ACA would really help some of these vulnerable populations right now. One of the expressions that I think is so telling about this is we are all in the same sea, but we are not all in the same boat. I'm a privileged person who's worked through this entire recession. I still have my house. I'm not worried about getting evicted. That we have entire communities, meaning geographic areas of the country, based on the demographics, the jobs, and the history of our nation that landed us here, who are really, really suffering, and we need to be looking to the federal government for help.
Let me ask a question, because I know, Vanessa, you deal a lot. I've seen a lot of your posts recently, a lot of your efforts going toward helping people find employment. What is some women and men who might find themselves in those statistics that Jamie was just talking about?
So the numbers don't lie, folks. The numbers are real. And from my standpoint as a job provider, a recruiter, a talent acquisition expert, or whatever you want to call me, I help people become gainfully employed. And what I'm seeing from the metrics that I study and pull every day is that women are being disproportionately affected as a gender, and then Black women are being super disproportionately affected as a group. And within that group of Black women and women of color, devastated because we have a high percentage of households run by single parents. Okay, so 140,000 jobs lost by women in 1 month. Some people have said to me, well, Vanessa, considering the population, that number's not that high. Okay, okay, shut up, first of all. Second of all, when you lose your job, what's the first thing you lose in 90 days? Your health care. So how are you, and you can't afford COBRA. Don't nobody say COBRA, because it's unaffordable. It's price prohibitive, okay? So you lose your medical, and then somebody gets sick, you have little kids get fevers and runny noses, who's gonna pay for that? Okay, and then if you're not working, you don't have access to certain things if you can't pay the internet bill. How are you gonna search on Indeed for a new job? So multiply 140K times that, and the number is huge. So we gotta stop thinking linearly when we put out a number like that, because there's so much more lost than just 140K jobs. So I want folks to think more broadly, as Jamie said, that when 140,000 women lose jobs, those are 140,000 base purse holders. We control the purse strings. Whether you're married or not, we control it. Yeah. So that's what we got to start. That's how we have to start thinking.
I think also to that point, Vanessa, not only thinking more broadly, but one of the things that pains me, I think, the most in all of these conversations is the fact that we have an inability to think more proactively. We're a very reactionary society. We wait for things to happen. Wait for things to blow up before we realize that there's a problem that needs to be addressed. The reason that we have such an inequality in these statistics is not just because that's by happenstance where it landed. We have to dial the gauge back and see how we got here. And it all comes back to not diversity in the workplace, but equity in the workplace. The value that we place on the employees that we're then determining are non-essential. So when we get to these decision-making moments and we have to itemize who we need to keep and who we need to let go, are those things not being factored in? And my answer is yes, they are. Because if Kimberly is not a valued employee and you don't see what I add to the company structure, the company bottom line, then you may ultimately decide that I'm non-essential. And we have to kind of dig at the root as to where and why that is the reality.
Well, let me add to that. Let me clear that up for you guys. I've been in HR for all my career. And when companies want to acquire other companies, the first thing they look at are layoffs. That's the first thing they look at. They don't look at the other parts of the balance sheet. What human resources can we cut to give us enough revenue on the books to afford to buy this other company? So I've been in those rooms where those decisions are made, and they are looking solely at those people who have not rated high on their performance evaluations. How's Kim doing? Oh, she ain't coming to work. Oh, she late all the time. Okay, Kim's gone. It's not personal, folks. This is why companies cannot be considered people. All right, somebody stupid said that a few years back.
Well, Vanessa, I think you
So-
ought to, go ahead, I'm sorry.
So HR, the decision makers in a corporation look at human resources first.
And I think you hit on something really important. Companies aren't people. These decisions are not personal, and all sorts of biases go into them. But we also have federal policies that we could bring to play that would help mitigate this. Vanessa, you've brought up a really important point. Our healthcare for many of us is tied to our employer. So when you become unemployed, you lose your healthcare, and you can't go out and immediately get your kids signed up for CHIP that moment if you're unemployed and you need help to get your kids signed up for healthcare. These things are not fast enough. The administrative process takes a long time. And we are not focused on finding ways to ensure that there's a quick, easy way for people to get healthcare, or even starting to think about the real problem here, which is that our healthcare is tied exclusively to our employers in the first place for so many Americans.
Yeah. And that trickles down. I mean, we talk about the real cost or the real impact in societies. This is another area in the long run that does impact the bottom line for all Americans, not just those that were laid off. So, I mean, I think that when we talk about, the Affordable Health Care Act, a lot of people only looked at the obvious, but not the trickle down theory of it all, and the issues that it helped to solve. And that was the overhead that we end up paying for those people that don't have health care.
Yeah, because we do have universal health care at the emergency room. They have to see you at the emergency room when you're sicker and you may have a condition that could have easily been covered had we treated it proactively and addressed that when you just got a little sick, or through preventative health care, which is one of the things that Affordable Health Care aimed to address. But even that is a longer term strategy. When we have families right now who are really suffering, we need to make sure that not only do we keep moratoriums on evictions, but let's keep in mind that the people who own those homes, rental homes or mortgages, particularly if it's a rental place, if you have an individual landlord who has one rental property, they still have to pay that mortgage. So we can't then set that family up to fail because there's not enough relief there because we put in moratorium on evictions too. We have to be, to Kim's point, looking at this whole system so that we can find some relief and make it through this pandemic together. The end is in sight. Vaccines are out there.
Well, education is vitally important right now. Education is vitally important right now. We just can't be out here talking. We have to actually put pen to paper and develop curriculum on what people need to know to be proactive in this pandemic. And I'm sorry to say, but you need to prepare that you're not going to have a job. You need to prepare for that and then get your ducks in a row like you're going to be fired tomorrow. I hate to say it, but that is the reality of where we are. So if you are better prepared, then it's still going to be a shock to your system, because some people have been on their job 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years, and then they find themselves unceremoniously laid off, and then they don't know what to do. So if they can keep their resume updated, keep their LinkedIn profile updated, keep your insurance updated, keep your kids' insurance updated, and then prepare like you will not have a job next week. I believe
that-
that's going to help
yeah.
a lot of people.
Interesting, because, oh, so I'm sorry, go ahead, Jamie.
Well, I think that ties back to some of the places where we started. A lot of us who, if we lose our job, have family or friends who we could call up and could help carry us through. And communities where we've had such tremendous job loss, people can't call it, their mom's unemployed too, their siblings have lost their jobs too, their friends have lost their jobs too. This is an atypical situation which requires us to come up with more creative solutions than we may have had in the past. And Mary?
Yes, sorry, I got distracted by a message that came in. You know, what I wanted to ask Vanessa, and actually Kim can talk to this second part because it's something you and I both share in. People are excited because they have, this is for Vanessa, people are excited because they have, things are looking brighter because people are getting vaccinated. You have businesses and travel companies, cruise lines, etc., planning for a big influx of people because they're not canceling things as of June. So I guess people are not really thinking, like, I know you just mentioned it, but I wasn't even thinking about that. People are getting ready to get back to life, so they speak. How do you see that? How do you see or call for people losing their jobs and being prepared for that? Because if you look at what they're planning for, they're looking for happy days are here again, but you're saying you need to prepare.
Not only do they need to prepare, but they need to get mentally prepared to not have work.
Even
It's
though
hard.
everybody else.
It's hard for me to say it, but these are the facts. Well, they can be, yeah, they can be as happy as punch, but I'm here to tell you, if you're planning on going on vacation and you're not planning on how you're going to pay for it when you get back, then your priorities are kind of askew. So all I'm offering is for people to plan ahead right now. The pandemic is still raging, folks. It's going to take the rest of this year and probably all of next year to get these people vaccinated. All right. And let me tell you, people are not running to the vaccination clinic. They're just not. So they are throwing away vaccines every day because of that. So if anybody is listening, this is not doomsday advice. This is practical, sound advice, tips, excuse me, I don't give advice, tips of how to change your thought process now in the pandemic so that you're not as devastated if something should happen. I know you can't get insurance in 24 hours. I know that, but there are programs in the communities that a lot of people take advantage of. And all you have to do is go to the internet, read up on them, or go get the flyer and keep it in your office or keep it in your house. And then if you think something's going to happen, you spring into action. And then you also ask people like myself and other professionals to help you along. Don't be afraid to ask for help.
Say that again.
Don't be afraid to ask for help. We don't come on this show every week, guys, for our health. We are here as subject matter experts in all of our own areas of expertise. And we really value what we do here on this show. And we want folks to value and take what we give you. We're giving it to you for free. Take it.
And if you have questions about the vaccine, I do want to refer people back to that. We've had two different shows with experts, with Dr. Grant Tower and with an epidemiologist from public health experts from Florida. If you have questions about the safety and efficacy of the vaccine, of course, talk to your doctor, but I would refer you back to our shows. I will share, I've gotten my vaccine. So I'm not talking about something that I wouldn't actually take the risk of as well. I can tell you that in my case, the risk of the vaccine is way lower than the risk of of COVID. And this also helps make sure that I won't miss work if I get sick. And, I know people need to wait for their turn, and know that in lots of places in the country, people are having trouble even finding a vaccine to get. But if you have questions about the safety and efficacy, how these came across, the different types of vaccine, we've got the 2 mRNA vaccines and the vector vaccine, please talk to your doctor and use reputable news sites. I know that recently in Europe, they thought there was some blood clot risk from the AstraZeneca vaccine. It turns out the number of people, having blood clots after the vaccine was lower than the general population of people not getting the vaccine. So that was something where is a great example of where we have been absolutely erring on the side of caution to make sure these vaccines are safe. But you don't need to worry about the AstraZeneca vaccine because it's not one of the 3 that we're using in the United States. And there's no evidence so far that J&J, which is our vaccine that's also a vector vaccine, causes the same problem. But please go back and watch our other shows and talk to your doctor. Don't go the crazy YouTube videos. I mean, go to our YouTube videos and they may be a little crazy, but please talk to your doctor about the vaccine. It is safe and it is effective.
And I can tell you that it honestly had a lot to do with those 2 segments and a soft nudge by the work that Vanessa's doing that got me to take the vaccine. I was and am anti anything Trump has even touched. So even having his name attached to the rollout of this vaccine made me take pause to ever taking it. But after having an educated conversation with the doctors and hearing what they had to say, and then ultimately the resource that Vanessa made available, I decided to take it. So definitely take a look, be willing to listen. It's good information.
And for those of you that might be interested in the 1 shot, the Johnson & Johnson, I just received another blessing last night of someone that told me where you can go in the Northern Virginia area to get a Johnson & Johnson 1 shot. So feel free to reach out to me through Mary or whoever, and I'll be happy to pass on that information.
Oh, we do have some great news on the vaccine front, which is that the federal government under the Biden administration is setting up a national program to manage the logistics of the vaccines to help address some of the disparities between who's able to get a vaccine and who's not, and ensure that the supply chain and logistics are going to go well. And I want to be very, very clear about something. I understand Kim's trepidation with listening to the previous presidential administration on this. I shared I have an autoimmune disease, and so I'm somebody who is dependent on Plaquenil to keep my kidneys and my heart protected, and I had trouble getting it. So the lies told by the Trump administration affected me personally in a way that I was worried was going to risk my life. I need that medicine to stay alive. So I don't want to touch anything that administration has messed with either. But as much as Trump likes to take credit for this, he did not do this. Operation Warp Speed had nothing to do with the Moderna vaccine. The Pfizer vaccine, this was not Trump who did this. If Trump were still in charge, he wouldn't have bought as many vaccines as we had. He wouldn't have had the goal of 1 million vaccines a day for, that we were looking at for 100 days. And Biden is knocking that out of the park. We are getting closer to the end of this. And if you look at the Pfizer vaccine, at first we had questions about whether it was going to offer, keep you from actually transmitting the virus to other people if you get it and you don't get sick. It has a 96% protection rate that prevents transmission if you get the virus and are asymptomatic. 96%. So still keep your masks on. I'm vaccinated and I'm still masking up. I'm obviously in Seattle, and I flew here yesterday, and I wore a mask the entire time on the plane, all through the airport, actually double mask, just to be 100% sure, but 96% prevention of asymptomatic transmission. These are great numbers. These are going to save lives. And if you want our economy back to normal and our women in the workforce and men back to work, let's all get vaccinated. And I'm so grateful to the Biden administration that we're going to have some federal guidance on this, because the federal government will make sure the logistics are done really well. One of the big mistakes we made over the last year was to leave states hanging, not provide adequate guidance, not provide resources, and put states in positions where instead of equitable division of allocation of resources, we had states competing. I mean, you had Governor Hogan up in Maryland flying masks and things in through the under the cloak of darkness, and then hiding them from the federal government for fear of seizure of legal things that he was able to use his relationships to procure. We could have been doing that as a federal government the entire time. Thank God we're doing it now. To every Biden voter out there, you saved lives. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I'm getting my second dose on Monday, thanks to the school system. I too was hesitant in getting that done, but you know, like you said, after those 2 shows that we did, I watched them more than one time. And I called Dr. Tower, and I talked to doctors in my area before I made my decision. And Dr. Grant Tower, who actually is in the video on the show, talked to me at length and practically begged me to get it, you know, and it was that passion and trying to eliminate the stupid things, the stupidity of what we had heard previously about a lot of other things that helped me make that decision. So I go Monday for my second one. The other thing I wanted to talk about before we move off your screens today is you brought up a really important piece the last time we were on air, Kim, and I actually think we were off air when you mentioned it. And we started talking about single parents, and we started talking about you know, how we're faring. And I had a conversation with a couple coworkers, and everybody was talking about the stimulus check, and everybody was talking about what they got. And I was standing there, and I could feel the heat rise up on my neck because, you know, I still have adult children in the house because they're in college. You can't afford to live out there on your own right now. And I think that the government can do a better job when they are dealing with single parents. I don't think that they're considering a whole lot. Jamie, you can speak to this too. I don't think that they're really considering a whole lot of nuances. Like you mentioned, health insurance, you know, feeding these kids, you know, paying tuition if you have to deal with tuition. A $1,400 stimulus check is not going to help with tuition. It may cover rent, but it's not going to cover, you know, that. So can you speak to what your experience is, if you want to share that, or can you speak to some areas where you think government needs to take a deeper look and not just pay out on the surface of what they think is going on?
I mean, again, I think a lot of it goes a couple steps back, but it'll be a whole other show for us to delve into that. But the value that is placed on the work that a single parent has to do to run a household, I think needs to be addressed first. Because you're right, there's so many nuances after we even get to the overhead. So yes, we have the overhead, we have the health insurance, we have every little single minute detail in that home, from the toothpaste to the toilet paper to the food to the electricity. We all used to, and all on one salary. We used to be outside of the home during the day, so the electricity was off, the heat was off, so we were able to save there. All of that is doubled. The food bill is doubled. The things that we have to do to support our kids and help them thrive in a virtual world, because we're not teachers, at least I'm not. I know my shortcomings, and I'll tell you firsthand, I am not smarter than a 5th grader. He needs a tutor.
Yes, you are.
Girl, please. That math is giving me pause to think differently. But, so we have to pay for these things, and we are all on one salary. But the piece that is really, I think, not counted in is also the opportunity lost. So when we talk about single parents as professionals, single parents as the sole breadwinner, how much money is being left on the table because we're not able to take advantage of opportunities just because of bandwidth. We're busy running the household. We're busy caring for our children. We don't have that counterpart. And it's not to anyone's blame at all. We take that on 150%. But
We do need to find those soft landing spots in our careers because we have to balance, to your point.
yeah, but that takes creativity. I tell my son every day, he's blessed that, yes, mommy is working her, fingers to the bone, but she's able to do it from home. Thankfully, I'm in a career that I'm able to work virtually. A lot of parents are not. Right now, they are out of the home 15 hours a day, trying to keep a roof over their head. So there are those areas that we're able to kind of focus on and keep a positive, and just keep stepping forward. But when we talk about a $1,400 stimulus, that's barely enough to even cover the food in the household. And when you have a 2-parent household, that is kind of shared. And so I think the government, especially in this new world that we're in right now, needs to take a look at how the things that we've done because of COVID, and again, I'm not complaining because it was safety, and I'm a fan of virtual until we get into a safe place. But what does that really involve as far as the financial burden that has been placed on these homes, and how do we create a balance to be able to help us, still succeed and still thrive and still have some level of equity? I don't know.
I think one of the things we need to do is, first of all, start with the reality of what Americans' families are right now. One, people are getting married a lot later. We have far more single people to start with. We seem to focus all of our policy around the idea that we have this nuclear family with 2 parents and 2 children, and that's just not our reality anymore. As a matter of fact, the United States has the highest rate of children living in a single parent household. This is America. My friend Atiba, who we've had on the show before, that does a lot of these things, saying, this is America, and that's true. Almost a quarter of U.S. children under the age 18 live with 1 parent and no other adult. And that's 3 times the share of children around the world, who are at about 7%. So when you go in and start thinking about how we want to shape federal policies, it isn't necessarily helpful to shape them around the concept of a 2-parent household. Certainly you could say, well, 3/4 of children are living in a 2-parent household. Well, but when you start looking at the number of people who are single, number of adult children who have to return to live at home, they're not counted as children, but are living in these arrangements that are different. Our reality doesn't look like this 1950s Leave It to Beaver thing we see in our heads. The other thing I think we need to do is to continue to drop the stigma of single parents. When people say single mom, they seem to have this vision of an irresponsible woman who got pregnant out of wedlock, and shouldn't we be judging that? Well, let me tell you from my personal experience, you can do everything right and still end up as a single mother. I met my ex-husband when I was 26, didn't get married till I was 28. I was in graduate school at the time, 1 semester away from graduating. We bought a house before we had a child. We exchanged credit reports before we got married. And again, I got married when I was 28. So I did everything. I had actually read a book. I did everything that you were supposed to do. And I'm still ending up alone as a single mom. And even having done anything right doesn't make me more right, more better, or my situation any less fortunate or unfortunate than a woman who does find herself pregnant before she's married, or make the choice to have a child out of wedlock by intent. These are all absolutely valid choices for how we have different families. So why are we making policies trying to force us back to this time when, let's be very clear, the reason we had such a low divorce rate is because women couldn't leave unhappy marriages and abusive men. We didn't have the financial ability to do it. Most divorces are actually initiated by women and not men, because it's when we figured out we could get out of unhappy situations, we did. And this is not to bash my ex-husband. Sometimes good people can, get married, do their best, and have it not work out. But sometimes there are horrible, unsafe situations, and that thank God we can get out of as women and protect our children. But we need federal policy shaped around the reality of American families.
That's why I said that this conversation would have to be continued, because it goes so much further back than the actual discussion of where we are today. Policy in some way is determined by perception. And if people's perception is skewed on the topic, it's going to impact the policies that they put in place, plain and simple. And I think you brought up a great point that, a lot of judgment is placed on single parents, specifically single moms. And it's easy for people to create or perceive that they are not doing enough. I can tell you that my household runs and thrives because I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure it does, with or without a man. My son is going to get what he needs. But at the same time, I think that there needs to be a discussion around, the equity that is involved when we do get into situations like a pandemic and things are being put around, and making sure that we're taking into consideration those one-parent households that are having to recover as well.
And I think we also need to go back to some of the policies that we have made that are more likely to drive single parent households. One of which is the incarceration of large numbers of Black men for crimes for which white men would not be in prison, and how that breaks up households. And even when people leave the prison system and have served their time, even that they've received disproportionately, going out there and getting a job with a criminal record is really, really difficult. And this does tear apart families. These policies that we have that are really hurting men don't benefit women either. They hurt families. And if we want families to be able to stay together where it's appropriate, we need to stop the mass incarceration of Black men. I'll say it.
But then more so than we talk about the policy and we talk about the financial, I think for me, what is the biggest key point to touch on in this conversation, Mary, is the health and well-being. I mean, I think we all have had to figure out how to recover during this time and how to keep our families thriving. But and maybe I'm partial, I don't know. I'm not a married person, so I can't speak for them, but I will speak for me. And the assumption is it's a whole lot harder to do it as a single parent during a pandemic. And it might just be me coming up with that, resolution, but I do feel like mentally it does take a huge toll. And I think that's the area that needs to be discussed.
I think you're right. And I think I don't even know how to begin the discussion, but I know one thing: we need to have, when town halls are happening during the election season and things like that, these are the type of questions that need to come up. I've never heard anybody say that they were going to do anything for single families. I've never heard it. Every time they talk about it, they were like, they'll talk about, well, we're going to do this for American families. Okay, what does that American family look like? And I think that is a topic that we are going to have to hit next month, because it is true. What does that look like? It looks so much different than what it used to. And I think that's why we wind up in a lot of situations that we are right now, from everything that happened with the insurrection and before, because people won't let go of the past. We're not there anymore. So you can't hold on to the things that you thought was right and you felt comfortable in, because now things are changing.
Well, I think you also hit on something really important about, we are in this pandemic situation, and it is an increased level of stress for those. And when you look at those of us who, all three of us are single parents for different reasons. I'm divorced, and that's why I'm in this situation. But there've been all these researchers now coming out talking about how we are all walking around with at least some, what they're calling mild cognitive impairment. And Mike Yassa, who's a neuroscientist at UC Irving, said, and this is reported in The Atlantic, based on everything we know about the brain, two of the things that are really good for it are physical activity and novelty. A thing that's very bad for it is chronic and perpetual stress. Being a parent, as rewarding as it is, and becoming a mother is the best thing that ever happened to me. It's all I ever really wanted to be when I grew up. But it is stressful. And it's especially stressful right now. I'm watching, I've lost family members to COVID. It's hard, I'm high risk. I spent the last year honestly afraid that something was going to happen. I was going to leave my children without any parent. And what he says is that living through a pandemic, even for those who are doing so in relative comfort, is exposing people to microdoses of unpredictable stress all the time. Mm-hmm. And so this is affecting our brains. He says it's a heaviness, like you're waking up to more of the same, and it's never going to change. And I felt that we talked, the purpose of the show is how the pandemic is destroying women. Even in my very, I had a job that let me work from home. So even though I was high risk, I was able to figure out how to get my groceries through curbside. My friends and family, thank you to each of you, have been so supportive in helping keep me safe. But it was profoundly stressful. And for a while there, it did feel like it was never going to end. But I trust President Biden that if we come together as an American people, and this is on us, not the government, go get our vaccinations, continue to socially distance and wear our masks. I'm going to be at a cookout with you ladies on the 4th of July somewhere. We are going to have some fun this summer.
Woo-hoo! I want to say this at the final few minutes that we could talk to. An interesting conversation I had was, I don't even know how to, women have been breaking glass ceilings. We've been busting down doors, turning over tables until we got a seat at the table. Now with the pandemic, we're faced with giving up those high-powered jobs, those businesses we started, different things like that, being the expert, the professional, those types of things, because we feel we need to stay home with our children or whatever that looks like for your family household. I know, Kim, you're a business owner. Nick, Jamie, you're a professional, and probably have broken down doors in both your areas. Do you feel the pressure of having your dream job and career or business and having to choose between home and what your passion is?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I guess I'll speak first. Because the industry that I came from, and I'm 25 years in as a professional, and I just went full-time freelance about 3 years ago. And as soon as I went full-time freelance, it took off and I was gone all the time traveling. Thankfully, I was able to take my son with me sometimes, but sometimes I wasn't. But it was constantly a struggle between being the single parent and the sole breadwinner, wanting to give my son access to the things that he needed to thrive, and living in an environment that is, a high income district. All of those pressures, kept me going professionally, but it caused me a lot of stress and sadness personally. I honestly feel like, and this is something I kind of thank God for today, is that COVID kind of gave me balance in a weird way. It made me stop and reassess and take stock of everything that was around me and redefine what success means to me. Thankfully, this is the first time in my life that I've been so sedentary.
Uh-huh.
And, I got to do it with my kid. And so thankfully to my support network, my sister's network, it helped me really kind of develop a new sense of purpose. Still thriving professionally, but now more of a focus on defining what my own peace looks like. And it, and that's just what it is. And I make no apologies for it anymore. I used to always, not that I was a people pleaser, but I used to kind of always want to give a solution for everybody and make sure I'm showing up good into it up. But now I have what my purpose is. I have who I care about, and that is who I'm going to be showing up for every day. And that's
I think
That's
I
awesome.
think you touched upon, how balancing your family. I think one of the silver linings, I don't know if you've seen this and work with your colleagues, but I've seen this pandemic, as we know historically, in my career, I started out at it was then part of Anderson, and I was a strategy consultant in this, it was hugely competitive career track. And one of the things that we see, backed up by multiple studies, is that when women take time off work and go do something for their children, it's seen as a negative with us. If we're taking a phone call from our kids' baseball game, it's a negative. Whereas men were portrayed as, being excellent multitaskers, and isn't he such a great dad? And we've had to deal with that bias in the workplace. One of the strange blessings I think I'm seeing from this pandemic is I'm seeing so many of my colleagues who are men saying, hold up, I got to go check on my kid who's homeschooling, or I have to go, particularly because even, if the kid's there during the day and the mom's either unable to work from home, or if it's a divorced family and they've got custody that day, I'm seeing a lot more men step up and say, hey, I need to go do this with my child. I'm hoping that will help create more parity in the workplace. And that sort of parity where it's okay to have work-life balance and okay to say, I have these limitations because I have my children, or I need to take care of these things with my kids, and not fear it as a woman, or at least have the fear level be equal between women and men. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm just asking for equity, that these things be perceived equally regardless of my gender. And I'm hoping that one of the lessons learned from this pandemic is that, in addition to how much more of our work we can realistically do via telework, because if we cut out those commute times, it does give us so much more time with our family, much more time, to Kim's point, to be sedentary, to sit there in your space of your house and not stress and just relax. I doubt there is any woman watching this program who hasn't driven home and sat in her car before she went into her kids for just 5 minutes to recalibrate, because you're going from a high stress work situation and wanting to be at your best for your kids. Taking away commute time, adding more hours back to our day, all of these things make us happier people and better parents. And I'll also say it, they make us better workers. This pandemic, this cognitive impairment, all of this is impacting our ability to get our work done, both in terms of the difficulties we're facing, but the good things we will carry forward about how we've learned to work effectively across geographies. And, I know Vanessa had to leave, but I'm sure she would say, as a talent acquisitions person, one of the realities we face that I can talk about as a labor economist is labor isn't actually completely mobile, because people don't just up and move their family wherever this job is as easily as you would think. Especially people of lower income levels find it incredibly difficult to save up for moving expenses and then a new down payment, or new 4 months last month's rent before I get back my last one. This ability to work remotely will create a more mobile workforce, which will create more job opportunities for women and men. So I think there will be some good things coming out of this pandemic, and it is not to diminish the loss of over 500,000 American lives. That is a tragedy that is unimaginable to me, but we owe it to ourselves and to our country to find the lessons learned here and make sure that we carry those good things forward and not forget what we learned through this experience, as much as we all really want to put this behind us.
And we do want to put this behind us. But make sure while we're doing this that, the good thing too is with our kids, as parents with our kids, to make sure that they understand what this time really means, and to teach them how to survive during these times. I think that's really important, particularly, if you have younger, it doesn't even make a difference how old your kids are. Now's a really good time to teach them how to save, how to prepare, how to, how to, because let's just take electricity and gas, for instance. If you're home all day, your gas bill and your light bill has got to be more than what it was 2 years ago. There's just no way around it. I know mine is almost double. And
I know my kids are taking longer showers now that they don't have to get up and get ready for school so fast. My water bill, it's like, get your little butts out of you do not need a 45-minute shower, kiddo.
And mine is longer because I just need to de-stress. So long baths or long showers are my.
I didn't say anything about us not having 45-minute showers.
That's my thing now. But I just, it's just really important that we continue to have these conversations. I know, Kim, that's a great idea to really kind of home in on the single parenting part. I already wrote that down. So we'll be doing one on American families and how it's changed and what it looks like, and probably what policies and things really need to start looking like. But I also want to make aware that we will be having our final show this month, and we will be dealing with hate crimes. hate to have to talk about it, but it needs to happen.
And
then-
please, everybody, check on your Asian friends. And one of my
Yeah.
friends made a post the other day asking us specifically to check on our Asian friends. A lot of my friends are Asian, are not okay. They are scared, and with reason. Please, go out there, be very vocal about how much we need to stop Asian hate. Please, I'm begging.
Yeah.
No American should live in fear based on their race or national or their ancestors' national origin.
And just how much longer are we going to still have to keep dealing with these? I'm like, the residual damage and the residual problems that we're facing. It's insane.
Yeah, I had one of my dearest friends, something that it's just stuck with me to the core, said that she lives in New York City, and she had asked some of her white friends to walk her from the train station to wherever she was going because she didn't feel safe, and they told her she was overreacting. First of all, if someone is scared, they're never overreacting. Never. The fear here is real. It's legitimate. Just where in Loudoun County, we just had a race-based incident in Woodbridge, and we just had 8 people murdered because somebody was having a bad day. Like we should have played the end of because you had a bad day. Like he auditioned from American Idol and didn't get it, so he goes out and kills 8 people. Shoots 8 people. We can't delegitimize and invalidate people's very realistic fear, and we also have to be motivated to do something, to rally around, particularly the Asian population, and stop treating Asians like they're the model minority and a subservient class. I understand it's a smaller proportion, but you can't call yourself, I'm going to say this, you can't call yourself a feminist and drop off the intersectionality of the Asian population in the United States as well.
I think at this point, it's enough with the explanations, enough with the educating, and just stiffer punishment for people who are determined to have committed a hate crime. Period.
And let's call out the 147 Republicans who voted against the Violence Against Women Act on the same day that occurred. We see you. Every Republican that voted, we see you.
Midterm elections are coming, because what? Midterms matter.
Yes, midterms matter, yes.
And after that, we've got 2024 coming. And I hope everybody is keeping a pen and pad nearby, or at least putting notes in your phone, because these are the types of things that you need to remember. Do not take these conversations for granted. These conversations are going to help you remember who you need to vote for, what questions you need to ask, and what policies need to be put in place. These conversations are just about that. So,
On who's on the side of the American people versus who's on the side of just some of the American people.
Exactly. So if you're watching this, particularly if you're part of the Suburban Women for American Democracy, please look for a post that I put up in the group. I'm going to need your help. So if you're watching, look for that post. We want to thank you all, from Jamie, Vanessa, Kim. We want to thank you for tuning in and watching. If you're watching this on replay, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the comment section below. Until next week, we just want to say ciao, and we'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching.
Bye from Seattle.
Bye.